Okay, so at this time of year, we know that we observe many of the inyanim of Avelis, minhagim of Avelis, during the time between Pesach and Shmooze, with the exception, of course, the Heilige Lag B'Omer. And it's interesting to understand, many of the boys have been asking him exactly what's going on, why are we doing this? Just because they died, therefore we have to observe something. What does this mean? So I want to just use a few minutes to understand what is going on, what happened, and maybe what's the message to us. Chazal tell us, that during the time between Pesach and Shavuos, 24,000 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva were nifta. Now we have to understand these were not stam Talmidim. These are Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, Ge'oinei Oilam, Tzadikei Ador. These were the biggest of the biggest. And they were nifta between the time of Pesach and Shavuos. Not only was that a terrible tragedy for Klal Yisrael, but really, this is why we observe the minhagim of Avelis at this time, is because what they represented was the future of Torah in Klal Yisrael. What these Talmidim represented was the future of Torah being taken to the next generation. They were taking the Torah that they were taught by Rabbi Akiva and others, and taking it down to the next generation. They were holding it strong. And when they died, there was a major sakona. What would be with Torah in Klal Yisrael? It was a very, very serious situation. No one knew what was going to happen. Avada Baruch Hashem, the Rabbeinu Shalom saved us. And there was Torah. Rabbi Akiva kept on teaching. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. We'll talk about that Be'ez Hashem next week. But the very fact that Torah was in a sakona was something that was very, very dangerous for Klal Yisrael, for the future of Klal Yisrael. And because of that and other reasons, we observe the minhagim of Avelis at this time. And therefore, of course, it's a little bit uncomfortable. Can't shave, can't have a haircut, can't listen to music, dancing, chasanas, all these sorts of things. It's annoying. But that was the point, to remember what happened. But it goes further than that. The Gemara tells us like this. The Gemara says, why did they die? What was the reason? What was the purpose that they died? What did they do wrong to deserve that? And by the way, the Gemara tells us they died the worst possible death. Of all the deaths possible, they died the very most possible, the worst possible death, which is a type of choking. Achsar is a type of choking where you can't breathe. Chazal tell us it's the worst type. Why did they die? Says the Gemara in Yevamah Samach Beis Beis Shaloi Nagu Kovet Zeh Lozeh. Whatever that means. Again, we don't speak Chas v'Shalom Lashon Hara about anybody. Chazal telling us for a reason. And Chazal obviously want to teach us something. And it's specifically this lesson that needs to be taught at this time between Pesach and Shavuos, that the Talmidim Rabbi Akiva were nifta shaloi nagu kovet zeh lazeh. There was obviously some kind of lack of respect for each other. What does that mean exactly? Again, Rabbi said we're dealing with Ge'oinim, Tzadikim. It's not pshat they were chas v'shalom being mezalzel in each other, whatever that means, but shaloi nagu kovet zeh lazeh. It's a sensitive idea. It's a sensitive point of lacking a certain amount of kavod for somebody else. Even if you're on par with him. Even if you're the same as him. Which is why specifically now, before Kabbalah Torah, before we accept the Torah and Shavuos, we need to work on this. Because Derech Eretz Kadma LaTorah. And the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says, where Klal Yisrael stood Bahar, Ki ish echad b'leiv echad. We have to have that achdus, we have to have that togetherness. The only way to have that achdus, the only way to have that togetherness is through kavod. Is being mechabed others, is being sensitive to others, in understanding other people's needs, other people's situations. A Yid calls me up last week, and he says to me, a Yid from America, a Yid from New York, he says to me like this. He says to me, I hope if you're on the street in Israel, when the siren goes off, on Yom HaZikaron, whatever, walk. Keep on walking. It's not a chilul Hashem. A regular guy. So I says, excuse me, what are you talking about? He says, not chilul Hashem. What's a chilul Hashem? Just because they decided that it's going to be today, doesn't mean I have to stand still when they're making a siren. It's not a chilul Hashem. They can't decide what's a chilul Hashem. So I told this Yid, I said, listen, I'm not going to get into a whole situation right now. We do, we don't, for, against. That's not the point. But first of all, from the Gemara in Yuma, you see that with Vadei Biyachil Hashem, Ayin Sham. But even without that, Noisa Ol B'Chaver, one of the Memches Kinyonei Torah, one of the things, in order to be Koine Torah, to acquire Torah, there's a certain sensitivity to think about somebody else and have sensitivity for someone else. And I said, if you've got on the street someone, whoever it may be, whatever age, whatever situation, and they had lost someone, whether it was on October 7th, whether it was afterwards, whether it was years before, it's irrelevant. And for them, this is a sad day. This represents remembering whether we do, whether we don't, I don't know, I don't care. But at the end of the day, if it's going to upset someone, if someone is sensitive to that day, then who are you to just walk along and say, I don't care? First of all, it probably would be a Chil Hashem, like I said from the Gemara in Yuma, but even without that, the sensitivity to somebody else, the sensitivity to realize what other people are thinking, what other people are going through, and that shaloi nogu koved zelazeh. That's what it means. What it means is we have to have this sensitivity to someone else, to think, what is someone else thinking? What does he need right now? What if I say this? What's he gonna imagine? What's he gonna go through? Is it worth it? Once the words come out of my mouth, I can't take them back. To be sensitive to someone else is exactly what we are required to work on at this time. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, which is what we're learning in this time, specifically between Pesach and Shavuos. First Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, what everybody knows, every single person here knows, the very first Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Moshe Kibbel Torah Misinai. And then it goes through the whole thing. The pass down the Messiahs. Where did it go from? Moshe Rabbeinu got it, and then all the way down the chain. Everybody asked the kasha. That's the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah, we have to know. Moshe got the Torah from Har Sinai, and he gave it over, and he gave it over, and it went down generation. Beautiful. We need to know that. It's our Messiah. Got the Rambam and the Akdom, it goes through it, Barichas Be'in. But the kasha is, why is it in Mesechtas Avos? Don't you think it should be Mesechtas Brachas? Take the first Mesechta in Shas. You open up Mesechtas Brachas, first Mesechta in Shas. You should know, this is not Stam. This is Moshe Kibbel Torah Misinai. There's a Messiah. We have this for a reason. We have this from the Rebbeinu Shalom, and it was passed down, transmitted from generation, from Rebbe to Talmud, to Rebbe to Talmud, Rebbe to Talmud. Unbelievable. Why is it in Avos? Why is it not in Brachas? First, Masechta and Shas. You open up, off you go. That's what you should have. What's it good doing in Avos? So famously, the Batanura answers, and he says that we have to understand that when a person learns Avos, as we do at this time, Avos is all about midas tovas, characteristic traits, improving ourselves, bettering ourselves. So sometimes a person thinks, like, that's like a nice thing to do. Really have to do that. That's nice. It's extra, right? It's I want to be extra, I'll do that. It's not really part of the program. That's why the Batanura, on that Mishnah it says, Moshe Kibbel Torah Misinai. That just like Mesechtas Brachas, Mesechtas Shabbos, Mesechtas Psachim, whatever it is, all Misinai, so too is Mesechtas Avos that goes through characteristic traits and midas tovas, and working on yourself is also Misinai. That a person has to work on it, and this is the time they have to work on it. I want to give you a few examples of the sensitivity that Gedolim had in a flash of a moment, and that means that sensitivity was amazing towards somebody else. Rabbi Zalman Meltzer was giving share. He was giving share klali in the yeshiva. The olim were listening, and the olim were handling backwards and forwards. And at one time, during the share, Rabbi Zalman gets a kasha. One of the boys perks up with a kasha. Rabbi Zalman stops to think, and then he says, I have no answer for you. And he continues on very quickly with the share. Finishes the share, the Talmidim come over to the Rebbe. Rabbi Zalman, really? That was a klotz kasha. That kasha that boy asked was no shaykhs to the sugya even we were learning. And the Rebbe said he doesn't know the answer and moved on. Like, what happened over there? Rebbe, I want to understand what went on. Listen to Rabbi Zalman Meltzer's answer. He says like this. This boy, when he asked the kasha, I understood straight away I had no shaykhs to the sugya. But what bothered me more is why he asked the kasha. This boy has never asked a kasha in shir. Never. I've never heard him speak out. All of a sudden, the first time he pokes up with the kasha, which is not even a geya. Why is he asking the kasha? Forget about what he's asking. Why? And then he said, I stopped to figure out what to do, and I saw in the window, there was a shadow of somebody looking through the window. And in the olden days, the way they used to look for a shidduch is they used to go, the father of the girl would come to the yeshiva, and he would see the boy, and he would decide. And Rabbi Zalman said, what went on? This was the father of the girl. He's checking out his future son-in-law, and the future son-in-law knew that, so he got a kasha in shir because he wanted to show something. Well, I'm going to embarrass him in front of his future father-in-law. So I just said, I don't know, and I moved on to the sugya not to embarrass him. In a flash of a second, Rabbi Zalman understood the sensitivity towards somebody else. That's unbelievable. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was a yid, kol haTorah kulai, a posek, a rav, a tzaddik, unbelievable. Somebody came to him, Rebbe, we've been married for a number of years. Unfortunately, we've not been blessed with children. Please give us a bracha. We've done all the scholars, we've done everything. We're looking for a scholar. Please help us to have a child. And Shlomo Zalman sat with them for a few hours, backwards and forwards. They went through the medical things, they went through the scholars, whatever they could do. Shlomo Zalman said, I'm sorry, I can't help you. He didn't want to give them a bracha. I can't help you. I can't give you a bracha. I can't. He left, you can imagine this young man, he left with tears, crying. He went to Shlomo Zalman for a bracha. Shlomo Zalman said, I can't give you a bracha, I'm so sorry. He goes back to his house. He has to tell his wife now that Shlomo Zalman said, no bracha. He comes back home. After about 20 minutes, there's a knock on the door. He opens it up. It's Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Rav Shlomo Zalman says, listen, I couldn't give you a bracha, I'm so sorry, but I want to come to your house, I want to cry with you together. That's the sensitivity of our gedolim towards somebody else. And let me give you one last example. A yid in America, a number of years ago, Rebbe Eliezer Galdzeiler, Rosh Hashiva of Or Yisrael in Brooklyn, an unbelievable yid, an unbelievable person. But listen to what happened, listen to this story, it's an unbelievable idea, and we'll leave you with this, with the sensitivity towards somebody else. Tragically, he was taken very early on in life, he had a car accident, and he was nifter from the accident, leaving his family, 13 children, and his talmidim of the yeshiva completely heartbroken. It was a terrible, terrible tragedy. A couple of years later, his daughter was driving in New Jersey, and she stops at a gas station. She stops at a gas station, and out from the little store over there to fill up the gas is a small dwarf. A little man, a dwarf, obviously born with some kind of handicap, and he comes running over to fill up the gas. Everything is fine. He notices that she has a picture of Rav Galdzeiler in her windows. No, it's her father. So he says to her, do you know that rabbi? And she says, yeah, that was my father. He says, was? What do you mean was? So she says to him, he died in a car accident a couple of years ago, terrible tragedy. And the man starts to cry. He starts crying and crying. And she says, what, you knew my father? Like, what, you had connection to him? You don't look very, So he says, I want to tell you something. I've worked here for many, many years. And most people look at me like an outcast. They barely look at me in the eye because they're embarrassed to look at me. They're embarrassed. Your father came here. And he looked at me the very first time he filled up gas. He put down the window and he said to me the following. You are an inspiration. You've taken the life that you were given, and instead of being a victim and lying in bed and being depressed, you've done something with yourself. He said, I have a yeshiva of boys, and I'm going to tell all my students about the inspiration that you are. He said, you cannot imagine. And I used to see him the whole time. He was the only person that gave me the time of day. And therefore, in 2 years, I haven't seen him. Now I realize what happened. Rabbi Yisrael Chazal tell us that the Talmidim of Rabbi Kiva died, Shaloi Nagu Koved Zeh Lazeh. We are given a matana from the Rabbeinu Shalom that at this time, we're here to masakin that, to work on ourselves. Tonight we're going to be speaking a little bit about dating and marriage, and one of the first things a person has to do before he starts dating, before he can even think about getting married, is know himself. Because if you don't know yourself, you can't bring somebody else into your life. Understand yourself, understand your milas, and understand also things that need to be worked on. Have the sensitivity to think about somebody else, have the sensitivity to work on that, and make sure that Be'ez Hashem we come to Shmooze with the Emestike Kabbalah Satorah, with the Ki'ish Echad B'Leiv Echad Be'ez Hashem. Have a wonderful day.